The snow fell in soft, glimmering flakes, covering the streets and rooftops in a blanket of white, while Christmas lights twinkled warmly through the frosty night. The scent of pine and holiday cookies lingered in the air, carrying a festive promise that made the city feel alive and magical. Clara wrapped her coat tightly around her growing belly, the chill biting at her cheeks, but her heart was warm with anticipation. Tonight was Christmas Eve, a night she had long imagined sharing with her husband, Ryan. She clutched a small gift in her hands, a token of love and excitement, hoping to surprise him after a long week of work. Her steps were quick, her breath visible in the cold air, and her mind filled with the image of Ryan's smile when he saw her. She imagined the candles, the twinkling tree, the warmth of home enveloping them in celebration. But when Clara arrived at their mansion, the front door was locked, and the glow inside seemed strangely distant. The faint sounds of music and laughter reached her ears, but something about it didn't feel right. A subtle unease prickled at the back of her mind. Ryan was supposed to be home. Why wasn't he opening the door? Her heart skipped a beat, excitement clashing with worry, and an unsettling tension grew as she stood alone on the snow-dusted steps, the promise of Christmas joy now tinged with fear and uncertainty. Clara remembered the early days of their marriage like a cherished photograph, edges worn but the colors still vivid. Ryan had been the perfect husband then, charming, attentive, and endlessly passionate. Their home had been filled with laughter, whispered promises, and nights where they talked about dreams of a family, children running through sunlit rooms, and a lifetime of shared adventures. Clara had believed, with her whole heart, that their love was unbreakable, that nothing could shake the bond they had forged. She had envisioned countless Christmas Eves together, cozy by the fire, wrapped in blankets, their hearts intertwined as the snow fell outside. Ryan's laugh had been the soundtrack of her happiest moments, his gentle hand always steadying her in moments of uncertainty. She clung to those memories tonight, hoping that the magic of Christmas would bring back some of that closeness, even after the long weeks of work, silence, and distance. But as she stepped back into the present, small, unsettling memories crept in. The way Ryan had started obsessing over wealth, the invitations to parties he attended without her, and the subtle shift in his priorities all hinted at something changing. Clara brushed off the uneasy feeling, attributing it to stress or seasonal busyness. Yet a whisper of doubt lingered in the corners of her mind, a quiet warning that something might not be as perfect as it once seemed. Tonight, she hoped that love would be enough to bridge the gap, but an unspoken fear stirred beneath her hope. Over the past few weeks, Clara had noticed tiny cracks in the life she thought she knew. Ryan's phone seemed permanently glued to his hand, messages flashing and disappearing too quickly for her to read. He offered excuses for late nights, work commitments, meetings, or last-minute events, but the frequency and secrecy felt wrong. She caught glimpses of lipstick on collars or the faint scent of perfume that wasn't hers. Veronica, a name Clara had overheard in hushed conversations, seemed to hover on the edges of her mind. She didn't want to acknowledge it, dismissing the uneasy feelings as paranoia or pregnancy-induced worry. Yet, instinct gnawed at her relentlessly, whispering that something was amiss. Even as Clara tried to focus on the holidays, on the baby growing inside her, and the hope of a joyful Christmas, her intuition tightened like a coil. The warmth of past memories clashed with the cold suspicion settling in her chest. Each unanswered call, each vague excuse, chipped away at the trust she had once held so firmly. Clara brushed aside the creeping dread, determined to believe in the husband she loved, even as the first, subtle signs of betrayal began to reveal themselves, threatening the festive joy she had so carefully envisioned. Through the grand windows of the mansion, Clara could see a world she no longer recognized as her own. Inside, the house was alive with celebration. Crystal chandeliers reflected golden light across polished floors, towering Christmas trees glittered with ornaments, and the scent of expensive perfumes mingled with rich food and champagne. Music pulsed from the grand hall, laughter echoing like a soundtrack of indulgence in excess. Guests moved through the rooms with practiced elegance, swirling in designer attire, glasses clinking, smiles painted on faces that had ambition and desire beneath. At the center of it all was Ryan, his charm on full display, laughing loudly and toasting with colleagues and socialites. Beside him, Veronica moved with a confident, almost predatory grace, her presence magnetic and commanding. She whispered into his ear, brushed against his arm, and smiled in a way that demanded attention. The sense of entitlement she carried was palpable, an invisible crown that separated her from the rest of the guests, and from Clara, who was nowhere to be seen. Clara's absence was the unspoken truth of the night. The warmth, laughter, and extravagance contrasted sharply with her struggle outside, the cold pressing against her coat and the snow crunching beneath her boots. The distance between her and the life she had imagined at Christmas could not have been more stark, and the subtle cruelty of being excluded stung deeper than the cold ever could. Clara's fingers were numb as she raised them to knock on the grand door, the ornate brass handle cold and unyielding beneath her touch. She had hoped to surprise Ryan, to step into the warmth and joy she had always imagined at Christmas, but instead, she was met with silence. Her voice trembled as she called his name, peering through the frosted glass panels, but only the muffled echoes of laughter from inside reached her ears. The chill seeped through her coat, and her exhaustion pressed down like a weight she could not lift. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and frustration twisting in her chest. Each unanswered knock and ignored call felt like another reminder of her vulnerability, amplified by the pregnancy that made her movements slower, her nerves sharper, and her sense of danger more acute. Panic began to creep in as she circled the front of the mansion, peering into darkened corners, wondering if she had been intentionally left out. The snow crunched beneath her boots, the cold air stinging her cheeks, and she felt a bitter loneliness that seemed to echo the festive joy she could see inside. With each passing moment, her hope wavered, replaced by a growing dread that this Christmas, she was utterly alone, and that the life she had counted on had slipped away without warning. Clara's trembling hands fumbled with her phone as she dialed Ryan's number again and again, each ring a piercing reminder of his absence. She listened desperately as the tone continued, unanswered, while muffled laughter and music spilled from the mansion like a cruel soundtrack to her despair. With each ignored call, her heart sank further, the icy grip of humiliation wrapping tighter around her chest. She banged on the door, hoping someone inside might notice, but the revelry continued as though she were invisible. A few guests glanced briefly in her direction through the windows, some offering a sympathetic frown, while others turned away, preoccupied with their drinks and conversations. Even the staff, bustling quietly to serve the decadent spreads and glasses of champagne, seemed hesitant to intervene, leaving Clara's vulnerability exposed against the backdrop of extravagance. Fear, anger, and helplessness swirled together within her. She felt her pregnancy amplify every emotion, the nausea of anxiety, the pounding of her heart, the sudden weight pressing on her lungs. Each moment outside the mansion, each glimpse of the celebration she had once imagined sharing with Ryan, deepened her sense of betrayal. She had come home seeking warmth, connection, and love, only to be met with cold indifference. The reality of her husband's choices settled on her like the snow at her feet, heavy, unyielding, and impossible to ignore. Clara realized with a shiver that this Christmas Eve, the life she thought she knew had shifted irrevocably, leaving her alone in the cold. As Clara's trembling body leaned against the frosty doorframe, memories of the past resurfaced unbidden. She recalled nights when Ryan had brushed aside her concerns, choosing work or social engagements over her comfort or emotional needs. She remembered moments of intimacy left unfulfilled, conversations ignored, and reassurances that never materialized. Each memory stung now, sharper under the weight of tonight's betrayal. Hints of infidelity had appeared over time, subtle excuses, mysterious calls, whispered names she had tried to dismiss. She had trusted him, believing in the perfect husband she thought she had married. She had believed love could conquer distance, wealth, and ambition. Now, standing in the cold and watching the party lights flicker behind glass, Clara realized how naive she had been. The man she adored had allowed other priorities to overtake the bond they had once shared. Her heart ached with the knowledge that her trust had been misplaced, and that the husband she had believed would protect, cherish, and love her unconditionally had been slipping away all along, leaving only an illusion of security behind. Yet amidst the pain, a quiet resolve began to form, a determination to protect herself, her unborn child, and the dignity she had almost allowed to be eroded by blind trust. Clara's fingers shook as she clutched her phone, her breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. She began calling neighbors, friends, and family, hoping someone would open their door, offer a warm meal, or at the very least, a comforting word. Every ring that went unanswered, every voicemail left with trembling hands, tightened the knot of despair in her chest. Some neighbors were away for the holidays, others offered apologies but said their homes were full of guests. A cousin she reached hesitated, unsure if it was proper to intervene, suggesting she wait it out. The polite refusals, though couched in concern, stung more than cold indifference. They reminded her of how alone she truly was. Pregnant, exhausted, and standing in the snow-dusted driveway, Clara felt the weight of societal judgment pressing down. What would people think of a woman wandering alone at night, seeking refuge from her husband's neglect? Each refusal, each pause, each polite excuse layered on top of the others, magnified her sense of betrayal. Ryan, the man she had trusted, was inside celebrating with laughter, warmth, and the woman she suspected had been slowly replacing her in his life. Her fear intensified. Was this intentional, a cruel way to make her feel invisible? Exhaustion threatened to collapse her, tears mingling with the cold as she realized that tonight, she was not only physically alone but emotionally abandoned in the cruelest of ways. The sense of betrayal and anger that had been simmering since she first sensed Ryan's distance now boiled over. She wanted safety, she wanted recognition, she wanted the man she loved to show even the slightest care, but the world seemed deaf to her plight, and the mansion behind her window stood as a cruel symbol of her exclusion. Inside the mansion, Ryan basked in the glow of wealth and indulgence, seemingly unaware, or perhaps uncaring, of the woman shivering outside. He moved among his guests with practiced charm, laughing loudly, boasting of deals, acquisitions, and luxurious trips. Glasses clinked in his hand, champagne spilling over polished fingers, and the party surged with energy, a living display of excess. Every laugh, every toast, every confident gesture reinforced the world he had chosen, a world of appearances, pleasure, and shallow adoration. Beside him, Veronica thrived in the center of attention. Her presence was magnetic and commanding, every gesture carefully calculated to draw eyes in admiration. She leaned close to Ryan, brushing her hand against his arm, her voice low and teasing. Her confidence, flirtation, and subtle dominance radiated power, and she smiled in a way that made it clear she knew exactly who controlled the room, and, most importantly, Ryan. Outside, Clara's cold, desperate struggle painted a stark contrast. The warmth and joy inside, the music, the lights, the laughter, mocked her vulnerability, highlighting the depth of Ryan's neglect and betrayal. Each glance she cast through the frosted glass seemed to cut deeper, each muffled cheer a reminder that the husband she loved had chosen this life, and this woman, over her. The disparity between the two worlds, one of decadence, control, and self-indulgence, the other of fear, exhaustion, and heartbreak, heightened the suspense and stirred a profound emotional anger. Readers could feel Clara's pain and betrayal intensify with every passing second, anticipating the moment when confrontation, reckoning, and revelation might finally arrive. Clara's shivering steps slowed as she noticed the faint glow of light from a neighbor's window, a warm contrast to the cold, indifferent mansion behind her. Gathering every ounce of courage, she knocked on the door, her knuckles raw from the cold. After a tense pause, the door opened, revealing Mr. Thompson, an elderly neighbor known for his quiet kindness. His eyes softened when he saw her, taking in her disheveled coat, her trembling hands, and the obvious signs of pregnancy. I don't have anywhere to stay tonight," Clara admitted, her voice quivering. "Please, can you help me?" Mr. Thompson's expression shifted to one of gentle concern. "Of course, Clara. Come in. You're safe here." Relief surged through her, mingling with lingering fear. For the first time in hours, she felt a thread of hope, a lifeline in the cold, merciless night. As she stepped inside, the warmth of the house wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. Her fear and despair had not vanished entirely, but for the first time, she sensed that she might survive this night, that she could protect herself and her unborn child. Hope flickered alongside the exhaustion, fragile yet undeniable, a quiet rebellion against the betrayal and cruelty she had endured. Summoning every ounce of courage, Clara returned to the mansion one final time, her heart pounding in her chest. She approached the staff member at the doorway, explaining who she was and demanding to speak to Ryan. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the music paused briefly, the festive chatter replaced with curiosity and tension. Clara's presence disrupted the polished facade of celebration, drawing eyes toward the trembling, desperate figure at the entrance. Ryan appeared, his tailored suit impeccable, his expression a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Clara, what?" he began, but she cut him off, her voice firm despite her quivering hands. "Why are you doing this? On Christmas Eve? Pregnant, alone, left out in the cold?" His face twisted into a dismissive smirk. "Don't be dramatic. You're overreacting. This is my night. I don't owe you anything." Veronica lingered nearby, a smug smile playing on her lips, her presence a silent taunt. The party, once oblivious to the chaos outside, now seemed to hold its breath, guests sensing the collision of personal worlds. Clara's fear surged, tempered by a burning anger that made her heart pound. Every ounce of humiliation, every sleepless night of worry, every ignored message, all culminated in this moment. Her voice shook, tears threatening to fall, yet the power of confrontation lent her strength. She stood there, pregnant, vulnerable, yet unwavering, facing the husband who had abandoned her. The emotional intensity was unbearable, despair, rage, fear, and courage intertwined. Clara realized that this confrontation was more than a plea, it was a declaration, a moment where her suffering could no longer be ignored, and where the consequences of Ryan's cruelty would begin to unfold before witnesses in inescapable reality. Clara stumbled back from the doorway, her knees weak, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. The cold had seeped into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the icy grip of betrayal and despair gripping her heart. She sank to the snow-dusted ground, hands pressed against her swollen belly as sobs shook her entire body. Each heartbeat echoed the weight of abandonment, each breath a reminder that the man she loved, the person she trusted most, had chosen another over her, leaving her alone on the night meant for warmth and family. Pregnancy hormones amplified every emotion, grief, fear, and anger surged together, making her feel fragile yet ferociously alive in her vulnerability. Memories of happier days flashed before her, Ryan's laughter, their plans for a child, the shared hopes of a Christmas Eve together. Now, those dreams lay shattered at her feet, replaced by cold reality. In the quiet between sobs, Clara reflected on the enormity of her loss. She realized the depth of the trust she had given freely and the pain of having it ignored. Yet, beneath the despair, a small ember of resolve flickered. She would survive, for herself and for the life growing within her. Even in her deepest heartbreak, she understood that strength would be needed to endure the night and whatever came next. Through the haze of tears and shivering limbs, a familiar voice called out, cutting through Clara's storm of despair. Mr. Thompson, her kindly neighbor, had returned with a blanket and a warm hand extended. "Clara, come inside. You're safe here," he said gently, guiding her away from the cold and toward the warm glow of his home. Relief washed over her in a wave, mingling with lingering fear, but for the first time that night, she felt the tiniest flicker of security. Inside, the heat enveloped her like a protective shield. She sank into a chair, allowing herself a moment to breathe, her tears still flowing but no longer solely from fear. The sound of a kettle boiling and the soft hum of a heater provided a rhythm that calmed her racing heart. For a few minutes, she was no longer alone. The experience illuminated the importance of empathy and human kindness. Society's judgment and neglect had pushed her to the brink, but one person's compassion had reminded her that help could exist even in bleak circumstances. In that small, warm room, Clara felt the first glimmer of survival and hope. She realized that, despite betrayal and abandonment, she could endure, she could find sanctuary, care, and the strength to continue, if only she accepted it when offered. Clara sat by the fire in the neighbor's living room, the warmth seeping into her chilled body, giving her a moment to think and breathe. Her mind wandered over the night's events, the cold indifference of Ryan, the laughter from the party she had been excluded from, and the cruel presence of Veronica. The betrayal cut deep, but amidst the pain, Clara recognized something vital: she had survived. She had faced fear, humiliation, and loneliness and had found the courage to seek help. Her unborn child stirred inside her, a reminder of hope and continuity. In that moment, Clara realized that her strength did not depend on Ryan or anyone else. She could protect herself and nurture her child, build a life rooted in love, safety, and respect. The anger and hurt remained, but they no longer defined her. She had reclaimed her dignity through action, resilience, and perseverance. For the first time that night, she felt a sense of emotional closure. The betrayal had been harsh, but it had revealed her own inner power, the depth of her endurance, and the unwavering love she could offer her child. Clara knew she could survive, and thrive, without Ryan, confident in the knowledge that she would never again rely on someone who chose cruelty over commitment. In the days and weeks that followed, Clara embraced her pregnancy with renewed hope and determination. Every kick and movement from her unborn child became a symbol of her independence and resilience. She decorated her home with care, prepared for the future, and immersed herself in creating a safe, nurturing environment. Each decision, each small accomplishment, reinforced that she was in control of her own destiny. Meanwhile, word of Ryan's behavior began to ripple through social circles. Though he still held wealth and status, whispers of his cruelty and neglect spread, hinting that consequences, social, personal, or otherwise, were on the horizon. Clara, however, remained untouched by the gossip. Her focus was her child, her well-being, and the life she was determined to build, free from the toxic influence of a man who had betrayed her trust. She understood a powerful truth: family, love, and strength were not defined by wealth or status, but by sacrifice, integrity, and courage. Maternal instinct, self-respect, and resilience had guided her through darkness, and they would continue to illuminate her path forward. By embracing her independence and nurturing the life within her, Clara had transformed betrayal into empowerment, proving that strength, hope, and love could triumph over cruelty and deceit.